So understanding human biology, it's important to recognize that it has a chemical/biochemical basis. Now, this is not a chemistry class, and I know that nobody in here has taken chemistry. Maybe somebody has, but I'm not going to require you to understand much chemistry in this class, although we'll be touching upon chemistry. And in fact, when I teach biology for the majors even, you don't tend to dwell upon the chemistry. In fact, if you can explain something without delving into the chemistry, it's often better, because if you can come up with nice visual or physical examples, they're easier to wrap your mind around than the chemical ones. Because the chemical ones, if you're trying to understand it, you got to first understand the chemistry. If you don't understand the chemistry, you're never going to understand the concept and forget it. But nonetheless, if you're going to figure out how it is that the human body works, you've got to understand chemistry. And so I'm going to quickly introduce you to 4 little concepts of chemistry. Not terribly hard ones, but they're words that we're going to be touching upon further as we head through this course. They all come under the heading of macromolecule. And there are basically 4 kinds of, or 4 categories of molecules that one finds in living things that are relatively big. They're relatively big molecules. And in terms of increasing complexity, the simplest of ones are the carbohydrates, so they can be fairly complex. And then you have the lipids, and then you have the proteins, which actually are the most complex of all. But then you have the nucleic acids. The nucleic acids tend to be last because they're not only kind of complicated, but they also form the basis of heredity, and that's really complicated. And so there we have these 4 different categories. Generally, the carbohydrates are water soluble. So they dissolve in water, or at least they're well wetted by water. So when you see carbohydrate, you should be thinking something that probably attracts water to it. And that's true in our bodies as well. We store things as carbohydrates, we attract water to it, and as a consequence, these things are relatively large, fluffy, and they take up a lot of mass. They make you heavier. Contrasting lipids, which tend to be water insoluble. So these are oils and fats and stuff like that. So we think of lipids as being these things that make us heavy because, we think of fat as making us heavy. But the truth is that it's water that makes us heavy. Lipids are a great way of storing energy in a very compact form that doesn't have a lot of water associated with it and has a whole lot of energy associated with it. And therefore, it really doesn't take up much space, and it really doesn't add all that much weight to us for the amount of calories that it can supply to us. So it's like, if you're something that moves around, it's a great way of storing calories, storing energy. And which is why, in fact, we store our energy as lipids. But by and large, this is because lipids don't attract water to them. There's a little bit of exception there that turns out to be really important. And that is in biological membranes, in lipid bilayers, as they're called, which is where we'll start in on Wednesday. All of our cells surrounding them have this layer of lipids that actually serves as what is known as a semi-permeable membrane, which is a word we'll get to again on Wednesday. And what that means is that they're outside of the cell that doesn't allow many things to cross it. And so stuff that's inside the cell doesn't exit the cell readily, and stuff that's outside the cell doesn't go into the cell readily. And the cell, as a consequence, is this unit of our bodies that is very much well-defined chemically in the sense that what's inside the cell tends not to get outside the cell, what's outside the cell tends not to get into the cell. So it's kind of like having a house that has good doors and windows on it. The inside of the house is a lot different from the environment on the outside of the house. But at any rate, these membranes, these cell membranes that surround these cells, are made up of lipids, but the reason they function as membranes is because they have a little portion of themselves that in fact is water soluble. So you have a molecule that has two ends. I'll just draw it like that. One end attracts water, and the other end repels water. I'll just say oil and water, because oil and water don't mix. And they actually arrange themselves into the structures that serves as walls surrounding our cells. So those are the lipids. So lipids, by and large, are water insoluble. They're like oils. Water and oil don't mix. But there's a little bit of exception to that, and the exceptions turn out to be kind of important. There are the proteins. So the proteins actually are the most complex structurally of these molecules. The proteins are the molecules that serve as machines inside of our bodies. Our bodies don't function except that we have these huge numbers of really tiny machines that do things for us. A lot of what they do are chemical. A lot of them are enzymes, they're catalysts. They convert one chemical into another kind of chemical. But a lot of them are also structural. Collagen, which is what holds our bodies together, our tendons and our ligaments. This is made of the protein collagen. I mean, the tendons and the ligaments are. So proteins, when you've got a function going on inside the body, chances are it's got at its basis one or more proteins that serve as little machines that get little jobs done inside of the body. And so proteins are hugely important. We'll just call them little machines. And when you're studying physiology, so physiology is really the science of how bodies work. Inevitably, when you're studying how something works inside of a body, inside of a cell, it comes down to there's some kind of protein that's doing something. And usually it's many, many, many proteins that are doing something. And then there's nucleic acids. The nucleic acids, most obviously, are things like DNA, which serves as our hereditary material. So the reason why your children look like you is because they share a lot of DNA with you, and the DNA is carrying information as to how individuals look and how they work, how they function. But in addition to the DNA, which is found in our lovely little double helix, we have something called RNA. And in the functioning of cells, the DNA serves as essentially the blueprint for how the cell should work. But it doesn't cause the cell to work the way it does directly. Instead, you have to express the DNA. And the way it's expressed is that the DNA gets converted into a molecule called RNA. And then either the RNA serves as a machine unto itself, or the RNA in fact goes on to make the proteins. And so you have this DNA in our cells, it's found inside the nucleus, it makes this RNA, which goes out of the nucleus, goes into the cytoplasm, and then in the cytoplasm the RNA either works as a little machine or it gets converted into proteins. But it's more complicated than that because you also have something called ATP. And ATP is the way that cells in the immediate term store energy. In our bodies, we've got at least 3 layers of energy stores. We've got the ATP, we've got the glycogen, which is a carbohydrate, which is an immediate energy store, but not as immediate as ATP. And then we also have fats, which serves as an energy store. We have other things in between there as well, but the ATP is when something is getting done energetically in the cell, usually, not always, but usually it happens because ATP is able to supply a little bit of energy to make the process go on. And ATP turns out to be an RNA. And then we've got other kinds of cofactors and things that are very important that also are nucleic acids, but those are the 3 big ones. So to finish up, without making us late, so I've got 2 minutes to do this, which I know the class ends at 11:05, so 11:10. In my defense, I had 4 computers that failed on me, so I was never able to look at the schedule. But I did remember it, but unfortunately I was looking at the wrong page. We've got these water-soluble things that serve as energy stores in plants. They serve structural purposes. For us, it's mostly about energy, although we also have tags on the outside of the cells that are made of carbohydrate. Lipids, hugely important in the membranes that surround cells, and also as our energy stores, especially for long-term energy stores that don't take up a lot of space or mass. Proteins are little machines. They really are the things that make our bodies work on microscopic scales. Nucleic acid is our hereditary material and also is really crucial for making our proteins, and also it's really crucial for supplying an immediate power source for the function of the cells. And that's it. All right.